Hi, everyone. How we doing today? Well, it is a real thrill to be here. There's really nowhere in the world that means more to me than this university. I just get such a great feeling when I'm on campus. These were the most formative years of my life. It is a place that means a ton to my family. Both of my parents went here. My father taught here for most of his career in the business school. He passed away in 2007. So we are a Northwestern family through and through, and I absolutely love this place. And there's nothing I have more passion for when it comes to Northwestern than the undergraduate experience, because that was my only experience here, and it shaped me in so many ways. And I understand what all of you are going through. I understand what a wonderful place this is, but I also understand how intimidating it can be in a lot of ways, and what a challenge these 4 years can be. So the first thing that I want to address kind of as I thought about, well, what am I going to talk to you guys about, right? The first question is, why me? Why am I, a sportscaster, speaking to all of these CAS students? Because the odds are really high that you're probably not going to become a sportscaster, right? I mean, maybe there's one in this room, right? So why would I be the person who's chosen to give this address? The most obvious one is what I kind of already touched on, is that I've been here before, right? I've been in your shoes. I'm a CAS grad, and I took a little bit different path. But there are a lot of CAS grads out there. So again, kind of, why me? And I believe it's because in the course of choosing a career that I asked myself some really difficult questions that I think some of us push to the side and don't necessarily want to ask and don't want to confront. I swam against the current a little bit, and that can be tough to do. And again, I think you have to have been in your shoes to understand how tough that can be to do. I think people from the outside might say, those kids are fine. No, it's hard, right? And I understand what a challenge that is, to ask those tough questions, to look inside and to say to yourself, what do I really want to do? And I found a career that I love. And that, to me, is the bottom line of what you're trying to do here today, right? I hope that at the core of why you are here and why you're starting to think about this is, how am I going to find something that I love to do? Because as Austin said, half your waking hours, and that's a conservative estimate, by the way, right? I mean, it may be more than that, depending on, there's some weeks where it's certainly more than that, I can tell you for me. So you better love what it is you're doing. You're going to get some great advice today, and I think you've already begun to get some in the morning sessions, right, between interviewing and writing your resume and how do you present yourself. Those things apply to any job in the world. And so this is incredibly valuable stuff. And I want to emphasize it because kind of what I'm going to say here today might, rattle the cages of some people. So the underlying message that I want to send is, this is really valuable. This is important, no matter what it is you choose to do. And you're going to get great opportunities later today too, right? You're going to get a chance to ask questions of professionals, of people who have been there. You're going to get a chance to understand what they're looking for and kind of how you can fit yourself into their equation. So all of those things are really important. But again, I'm here to encourage you also, and I hope that what you'll take away from my presentation more than anything is the notion that while you're asking questions of other people, and while you're trying to understand what it is they expect of you, you need to ask some questions of yourself too. And you need to ask those questions now. Now is the time to start asking those questions. You're all here for the same reason, right? I think we can make kind of a core assumption about the people in this room. And the most obvious one is, you're all smart. You wouldn't be here if you weren't smart. You wouldn't be at Northwestern if you weren't smart. We all know about the 9% acceptance rate, right? Intelligence is a tremendous gift. And many of, look, we didn't have anything to do with it. So congratulations, right? You won the intelligence lottery. But I will also say this, it's a burden. It can be a burden, right? Because what comes with it are these expectations that are heaped on you from a very early age. You've been successful in everything you've done. You were the kid in kindergarten who arranged the blocks in the correct order, right? And it just kept getting better and better. In elementary school, they'd ask you questions and you were the one who knew the answers, right? In middle school and high school, and you got great grades and you were held up as this example in your community of this person's going to do great things. And everyone had expectations for what those great things were for you to do. And part of what we do in our educational process in this country is we kind of lay out hurdles for people educationally. And we see who can jump over them and who can't. And you, in this room, have successfully been able to jump over those hurdles. Every time somebody said to you, jump, you said, how high? And you were able to do it, right? And that's what got you to somewhere like Northwestern. And I think that what it does, to a certain extent, is that it conditions you. It gets you into this mindset that the way to succeed is to ask of other people what it is that you should do, and then show them how well you can do it. And then you get this positive affirmation, right? They say, hey, good job, and you feel good about yourself, and you get the good grades, and your parents are happy, and they can brag about you. And everyone in the community says what a great person you are, right? And so what you do is you keep trying to jump over those hurdles. But now you're going to reach a point when you graduate from college where the hurdles are less clear. And this path, which was so clearly delineated for you, everyone does the same thing from when they start preschool to when you get through college, essentially, right? There might be a little divergence here and there, but it's basically the same thing. You finish one grade, you go to the next one. You finish middle school, you go to high school. You finish high school, you go to college. Okay, now what? And I think that moment of now what can be really scary. Really, really scary. Because all of a sudden, it's not as clear what you're supposed to do. And I think for some, the reaction is, and I think particularly for people of your skill set, right, these common assumptions that I'm putting into this room, the reaction is to look for the next hurdle. There has to be something else I could do which could get me back into my comfort zone, where people just tell me what to do, and I do it, and I show them how well I can do it. And you know what? There are those things. Those things do exist. And I think for a lot of people, you take that path of least resistance. And again, I want to emphasize, before I get into this portion of what I'm going to say, that that's okay for a lot of people. I'm not in any way saying that taking that path is necessarily a bad path, right? I think it can be a wonderful path. And I have friends who have taken that path who are incredibly happy people, which again, I think is the goal of what you're looking for. But we all know what that path is, right? It's the Wall Street finance job. It's the management consulting. It's law school, right? Those things where you can show them your credentials. See who I am? I'm one of the smart people. Give me another hurdle that I can go over and I can show you how smart I am. And you'll go, and your credentials will work for you because they have always worked for you and because you're smart people. And again, for some, those are the right hurdles, but they were not right for me. And I suspect that there are some people in this room who, if you were to really look inside and ask yourself who you are and what you want to do, I suspect there are some people who are going to attempt to jump over those hurdles who don't necessarily believe that those are the right hurdles for them, but they don't know what else to do, and so they're going to do it. And that was nearly me. I cannot tell you, well, I will tell you, but it was so close, and I am thankful each and every day that I didn't do it, because I don't think I would have been as happy as I am in my career. And so I want to tell you a little bit about my story so that you understand the right kinds of questions to ask yourself. I want to read you a quote. Has anyone ever heard of a book called Excellent Sheep? Yeah? Couple? Okay, read this book. It's by a guy named William Deresiewicz. He was a professor at Yale. And it's interesting. I've been thinking about these issues. As I said, like, there are a few things I'm as passionate as this, right? About making career decisions and where to go with your life. And I've been, all these thoughts through my head, I mean, over the last 20 years as I kind of, went through this and have had a really nice career that I enjoy, about how do you package these ideas so that people understand them? How do you articulate them? And I've never seen it done better than the first half of Excellent Sheep by William Deresiewicz. So please read it. I think it's absolutely phenomenal. It really, really resonated with me. And he writes of something he calls the salmon run. All right? And we all understand the visual, right? The salmon all following along on the same path. And the salmon run is kind of this time at the end of college where all the well-credentialed people are lining up for all of those careers that we were just talking about and trying to get those same jobs. And this is a quote I want to read you. He says, "The force that drives the salmon run is fear. It is the exact fear, and more than fear, the panic, the often crippling anxiety that lies behind the facade of serene achievement that elite college students learn to show the world. So extreme are the admission standards now, so ferocious the competition, that kids who manage to get into elite colleges have by definition never experienced anything but success. The prospect of not being successful terrifies them, disorients them, defeats them. They have been haunted their whole lives by a fear of failure, often in the first instance by their parents' fear of failure. The cost of falling short, even temporarily, becomes not merely practical, but existential." I think those are really powerful words. And I'm not going to ask you if that's you because I don't want to embarrass people by making you raise your hand, but I will tell you this. It was me. It was me. I mean, you couldn't describe me better than that paragraph. That was exactly who I was when I sat on this campus 25 years ago, to a T. To a T. And it took an incredible amount of luck, some real good fortune, and just enough self-awareness. And I will tell you, I was not a very self-aware person. I mean, I had a scintilla, an iota of self-awareness, right? But I had just enough that I asked myself those difficult questions at that critical juncture in my life. And I was able to find something that I really wanted to do. So, look, I'm not a person who loves to sit around and talk about themselves, but I really think that for this to be reinforced, I kind of have to get into a little bit of detail about my story, and so that's what I'm going to do. I was, like a lot of you and a lot of people walking around this campus, I was a high achiever. I majored in history here at Northwestern. I made Phi Beta Kappa. I got great grades. I worked my tail off. I was in that library a lot, but I had a great time too. And really enjoyed myself and made incredible friends. And it was a wonderful experience, as I said. And one of the things that made it really great was probably my biggest extracurricular activity was I worked at WNUR as a play-by-play guy for the radio station. And this was not, you guys live in the glory days of Northwestern athletics, the golden age. This was not the golden age of Northwestern athletics. They won 6 football games in my 4 years. Total. 6 total football games. And 6 conference basketball games in 4 years. So it was bad. So as you might imagine, there weren't a lot of big-time radio stations clamoring to do their games. And so we actually, we were the main voice. I mean, they had a contract, but they would get preempted for just about anything that you could possibly think of, like a parade or something. They might broadcast that on the radio rather than Northwestern football. So there were a lot of times where we were the primary play-by-play voice. And so it was great. It was an incredible experience, and I loved it. And I think if you would have asked me in college, well, what are you really passionate about? What do you like doing? I would have told you in a heartbeat. That's what I wanted to do. That's what I love. I was never happier than when I was doing those games. But I knew that it was hard. I knew it was a really difficult job, and you had to live in places you didn't want to live, and there were so many people who were competing to do it. And besides, I had the credentials to do other things. So why would I waste my time, right, talking about sports when I was one of the elite Northwesterners? So as a history major, what else do? You go to law school, right? So I thought, okay, well, I guess I'll go to law school. Why? I don't know. That's what history majors do. And so in the fall of my senior year, I took my LSAT, and I got a perfect score. I got the highest score you can possibly get. And so I get that piece of paper that said what I'd gotten, and I was like, well, this seals it, right? I mean, I'm going to be the greatest lawyer ever. I'm going to be God's gift to lawyering. Look at me. Right? Mr. Perfect Score. Okay. So I was done, right? I'm going to go to law school. So a few weeks after that, my father, as I said, was a business school professor. He had a very good friend who was a professor at Rice, probably his closest friend in the business. And this guy happened to be a Chicago native. His mom still lived in the Chicago suburbs, and he would come back and visit her a couple times a year. And so I'd gotten to know him through the years. Whenever he would come, he'd come, hang out at our house. He's just a wonderful guy. And so he's coming into town, and he's talking to my dad, and he says, what's Dave going to do next year? My dad said, I think he's going to go to law school. He got a perfect score on his LSAT. And I think that's what he's going to do. And, my father's friend says, we don't seem all that happy about it. He's like, well, I'm just not sure, he knows what he's doing. I mean, I don't think he has any idea of why he's doing this, and he's just kind of doing it. And this professor at Rice, whose name was Steve, he says, well, I advise a lot of our undergrads, and, I love talking to them about careers. Do you think I could take Dave out to lunch when I'm in town and talk to him about next year? And my dad said, sure, yeah, he loves you. I think he'd really enjoy that. And so I did enjoy it. He came here to Evanston, and I met up with him, and we went out to Walker Brothers and had some lunch. And he kind of asked me, well, what are you going to do? I think he kind of played it dumb. And I told him, and he said, oh, okay, yeah, that seems reasonable. He didn't really even press me on why I was doing it. But what he said to me was, is there anything that you feel like you didn't get a chance to do while you were at Northwestern that you'd like to do? Because, there's really no rush to get to law school. Law school will be there. So what if you took advantage of that time and did something else? And I said, well, the only thing I can really think of is, because I enjoyed Northwestern so much, I never studied abroad. I didn't want to leave campus. I don't want to miss out on anything. And it seems like people who went abroad for a year or even a quarter had a really good time. And I would hate to never get that opportunity. And he told me about a program, something called the Rotary Scholarship. And he said, you can go do this, and they give about 1,000 of them worldwide. Not a lot of people know about it. If you mumble it under your breath, it kind of sounds like Rhodes Scholar, right? Rotary Rhodes, same thing. And he said, why don't you apply for that? And they pay for you to go abroad for a year, and your only commitment when you're a Rotary Scholar, it's the greatest deal of all time. Your only commitment is your job as an ambassador of goodwill and understanding. And your job is to go to 6 Rotary clubs in your host country in the course of a year and give a speech about who you are and where you come from. That was it. And I said, where do I sign up for that? So I did it. I applied, I got accepted, and I got sent to Dublin, Ireland, and had a great year. But the real great part of that year, in hindsight, as much fun as I had hanging out in pubs and getting to meet different kinds of people and being immersed in this different experience, the greatest gift of that year was the gift of time. And, the world was a different place then. I don't mean to sound like old fuddy-duddy, but we were not as interconnected as you guys are now. Like when you went to Ireland, you were away, right? It was before the internet. It was before emails. You're not text messaging people, right? I didn't have a telephone. I had to go to a payphone on the corner. My girlfriend was a year behind me here, so she was still a senior at NU. I would talk to her once every 2 weeks for 30 minutes on a payphone, right? So, I was away. And in that time, I really started to think. And I realized that I didn't necessarily want to go to law school right away. And I don't know that it was an epiphany. I don't know that it hit me. I think the truth of the matter is I knew all along. But I was so worried about the next hurdle. I was so worried about the next credential. I was so worried about having that answer, the right thing to say when somebody asked me what I was doing next year, right? And thank goodness for the Rotary, because that was a good answer, right? I don't know what I would have done had I not had that answer, right? Because that's part of the pressure. What are you doing? What are you doing next year, right? You have to have an answer. Okay, so that gave me an answer, thank goodness, because probably my answer would have been, well, I guess I'm going to go to law school. And I have to tell you, that was really hard to admit to people that I didn't want to do it, because there's no greater rule follower than Dave Revsine. There's no greater pleaser than Dave Revsine. There is nobody who wanted that approval, the approbation, than me, right? I wanted people to say, yeah, that's the next thing you should do. And so to say, I'm not going to do it, I don't want to do it, was so hard for me. But I did it. And so as I had applied to law schools, and so I had acceptances, and so I just deferred them. And I came back, and as it turns out, my girlfriend was going to NYU med school, and so I said, I'm just going to go to New York. I need to figure something out, and to get me there, I need to get a job. And the job market was horrific. We were in a major recession at the time. I came here to Scott Hall, which is actually maybe, I was saying to Jane, I think it may be the last time I was actually in Scott Hall. This is where the career placement office was at the time, and they still had some late viewers trickling through. I mean, I didn't get back from Ireland until June. But I ended up getting a job with Chase in their financial analyst program. So I got one of those Wall Street jobs. And it's interesting. People ask me sometimes, well, when did you know that the Chase job wasn't the right job for you? And my answer is, I think I knew by lunch the first day. But the truth of the matter is, I think I knew when I went to the water cooler the first time, which was probably mid-morning, but definitely between the water cooler and lunch, I decided for sure that I didn't want to do this. I just wasn't interested. You know, I started meeting the people who were in my training program, and it was one of these where they, you know, it's like 10 or 12 weeks of just intense, you're learning all about how the bank operates and the world of finance, and these people were genuinely interested in it. This is what they wanted to be doing, with a couple of exceptions. And I wasn't interested, and it just reinforced to me this notion of, you gotta like what you're doing, because if you don't, it's miserable. And they liked it. Like, again, that's kind of my point, right? Like, a lot of these people really liked it. And so it's not that these are unlikable jobs. It's just, it has to be the right job for you. And I knew very quickly, and truthfully, I mean, I knew within a matter of a couple months, I'd say for sure, that this was not interesting to me. And so what should I do? Well, as it so happened, my relationship dissolved, so that was a good thing. I didn't have to be in New York anymore, right? And so I said, all right, what do I really want to do? I think this idea, I probably unfairly equated working at Chase and being a banker with being a lawyer. And you know, again, like, you don't know what you're talking about. I didn't know what I was talking about. I didn't know anything. I knew just enough to be dangerous. So that's probably unfair, right? But I said this is the same thing. You dress up in a suit every day, you go to an office, and you deal with clients you don't really care about, right? That was that was how I wrote it off. And so I said, I don't want to do that. And so I applied to come to Medill and to do a one-year journalism program. And I was having a conversation, so I got into that, and so I thought, okay, well, that's what I'm going to do. And then I'm talking to a friend of mine from high school who was doing a small market television gig in a town in Texas. And that was what I decided I wanted to do, right? I want to be a sportscaster. So I'm talking to my buddy, and he says, well, are you sure this is what you want to do? I said, no, I'm not really sure. I feel like I have to try it. And if I don't try it, I'll hate myself for not trying it, because I'm going to be stuck in this job, and I'm going to be unhappy, and I'm going to say I should have tried this. He said, well, if you're not 100% sure, I think the Medill thing's a great thing, and if that's what you want to do, that's great, but I could probably try to get you a job here and talk to my boss and tell him, how amazing I think you'd be. And I said, yeah, that'd be great. Then I could just go do it right away. And so he talks to his boss. The guy says, yeah, if Mr. Wall Street wants to fly down here on his own dime and come to Sherman, Texas, and interview for a job as a television news reporter, yeah, sure, I'll talk to him. And I went down and sat in his office. He had 200 resume tapes stacked up. Back then, you actually sent a physical tape of yourself on TV. I had nothing. I had some play-by-play tapes from WNUR that sounded like I was broadcasting from a manhole. But somehow, I convinced him that I should be his next hire. Honestly, I think he just liked sports, and he wanted someone else to talk about sports with in Sherman, Texas. And so he said to me, the next person who leaves, if you want to come down here, that job is yours. And a couple months later, someone went to Tulsa, and I packed up my apartment in New York, and I shipped it all down to Sherman, Texas, population 35,000, and I embarked on my career. I took a 75% pay cut and lived in a little tiny apartment and had the absolute time of my life. I mean, exact same thing, right? Like a day or two into it, I said, this is what I want to do. This is fun. I enjoy doing this every day. And so about a year into it, I had moved from news into sports, which is kind of what my plan had been all along. And I felt like I was good enough, I was getting enough positive feedback that maybe I could move on. Maybe I could really try to make a career of this. And so the way that you try to move on, kind of to the point I was making earlier, was you sent out tapes. And so I put together my resume reel, and I worked really hard on it, and I started sending it out. And I didn't hear anything. I mean, nothing. No, can you come in for an interview? No, we think your tape's good. I mean, you would literally hear nothing. No one would ever even tell you the tape arrived. What I started doing was sending them in self-addressed stamped envelopes and said, could you send it back to me when you're done with it, as kind of a little research project I was doing to see how much of it they were actually watching, because I had watched my boss watch tapes and he wouldn't rewind them because that took too long. He just popped them out, right? And so you could see how far they got. And I get tapes back where they got like 15 seconds into it and popped it out, right? Like, that is demoralizing. All right, in 15 seconds, they decided, this ain't my guy, right? So I probably sent out about 75 tapes before I finally got someone who was interested. And that job was in the Quad Cities, which are on the Iowa-Illinois border on the Mississippi River, like Davenport, Iowa, Rock Island, Moline, Illinois. It was a pretty significant jump up in market size. The station was awful. It was literally a worse station. But I was just so thrilled to move on. But the fact that I had gone for my first 74 or so had gotten me thinking a little bit about, okay, like, I think I'm good enough. People I work with think I'm good enough. Maybe I'm not good enough. And so I thought, well, what else could I do in TV? And so I thought about, well, maybe I would go and become a TV executive, right? That would be a way to merge what I like and maybe some of these other skill sets that I have. So I thought, well, I could go to business school. And so in the process of sending out all these tapes, I also took the GMAT and did well on that and applied to Kellogg and got in there and deferred. So at this point, I'm deferring law school. Oh, I didn't tell you, I deferred Medill too, just in case. So I'm deferring law school, journalism school, and business school simultaneously. And I go to the Quad Cities, and I start in there, and again, started getting some good feedback, sent out some more tapes, didn't hear anything. And all of a sudden, the business is expanding. CNN is starting a 24-hour sports news network in conjunction with Sports Illustrated called CNN SI, which turned out to be a very short-lived operation. And ESPN was starting something called ESPN News, which still exists to this day. I was fortunate enough to get offered a job at CNN SI. I really wanted to go to ESPN because in meeting with the CNN people, I was convinced it wasn't going to work out. ESPN was totally uninterested until I got the CNN job, and then they flew me up like 3 days later and made me an offer. And so I was one of the original anchors of ESPN News and worked my way up at ESPN from there. So at this point, I've sent out, I don't know, probably upwards of 100 tapes, 110, maybe something like that. I've gotten 3 yeses, and I'm at ESPN. 3 for 100. So you need to have thick skin in this world, right? There's a lot of rejection out there, even for the chosen few at elite universities. So think about that. That's not my primary lesson for you, but it certainly is a lesson. So I wrote the schools that I was deferring, and I told them I'm not coming. So I was 27 years old. I had spent 5 years wandering somewhat in the wilderness, questioning myself, wondering if it would work out for me, watching my friends get promotions on Wall Street, get hired at big name law firms, graduate from medical school, do all these things while I was out with a camera on my shoulder shooting a high school soccer game so that I could voice over the highlights in the 10 o'clock news in Davenport, Iowa. But you know what? I really believe that I was happier than any of them doing what I was doing, and it worked out. I took chances, I hedged my bets, I kept my options open, and that is a big message that I want to give you, right? Don't put all your eggs in one basket, no matter how passionate you are about it. Keep your options open. If I were 27, I could have done all those things had it not worked out for me, right? I could have gone to law school or business school or whatever, right? But I pursued what I was truly passionate about in that time. So I've been a sportscaster at a national level for 21 years. I spent 11 years at ESPN, had an incredible time there, never thought I would leave. But the opportunity came up when the Big Ten Network launched. They asked me to be their lead studio host, and it was just too much to pass up. So doing that, we just celebrated our 10th anniversary. I wrote a book along the way, so I got a chance to use, it was on the history of college football, so got a chance to use my history degree and my writing skills, and you know, it's kind of amazing just kind of how those worlds came together for me. So that's my story, and it is a long story. But I told it in the way that I did because I want you to take some lessons from it. And these are the lessons. Ask yourself the tough questions now. This is the time to do it. Not when you're 40 and you got a mortgage and you got a family and you got bills and all those things. Now is the time to do it, to figure out who you want to be and what you think you may want to do. And here's the thing, I kind of knew, right? Like I ended up doing exactly what I wanted to do. But the truth of the matter is, I think there were lots of other things that would have made me happy. Like had I ended up a TV executive, I think I would have really enjoyed that. So what I did was I took a step, one step, towards something that made sense to me. Now it turned out to be a step toward that ultimate destination. Right? It was the first step on a very clear path once I got on that path. But it didn't necessarily have to be. It was just something that made sense. Something that I could say, yes, I'm somewhat headed in the right direction. You have the luxury of time. I understand there are a lot of pressures, not the least of which is probably your parents, right? Saying, what are you going to do? I get it. I understand people might have loans. I get that too. But I'm just telling you, if there's any time to do this, it's when you graduate. It's right away, figuring that out, taking the time to explore. Don't worry about what other people think. This one to me is so important, right? Because of who you are and because of all of the expectations that people have heaped upon you. Your parents have expectations of who they think you are and what they think you should be doing. Your great uncle has expectations. Your fourth cousin, 3 times removed, says, I've always thought you'd be great at this. Okay, they all have these beliefs about you, but they don't know you. The only person who knows you and what's inside is you. And the toughest group to deal with in this situation are the people in this room and the people who aren't in this room who you walk around campus with, your peers, right? Because they think they have all the answers for what they're going to be doing and for what they think you ought to be doing. right? And there's a ton of pressure to have a good answer. What are you going to do after you graduate? What are you going to do? Where are you going to go? Who are you going to be? And you want to have that answer so badly. And here's the other thing that I would say. I think that a lot of those people who do have the answers, who know where they're going, right, who put up that great front to say, this is who I'm going to be, I think deep down inside, they're not sure they're making the right decision either. And when you get off that path, when you say to them, I'm actually going to do something a little bit different. I'm going to take some time. I'm going to do something different. I'm going to explore. I think secretly they're a little jealous and a little mad because you're not following the rules. That's not what we're supposed to do, right? I'm doing what we're supposed to do, and you're making me feel bad about it. I truly believe that. So don't listen to your peers. Don't worry about what they think. Understand the power of your degree, okay? You are getting a liberal arts degree from one of the best universities in the country, in the world. You can do whatever an employer needs you to do. You are smart, you're a communicator, you can think clearly, you can articulate your thoughts, you can write, you can defend a position, all of these things. You can collaborate with others. How important is that? In every workplace in America, no matter what you do, to be a good collaborator, to be a good communicator. You can do all those things. You'll be fine. You'll be okay. It's all going to work out. You have a powerful degree, right? Think about all the things that I was able to convince people that I could do. I mean, work on Wall Street, right? Like I was certainly not in any way prepared to do that, but they thought, well, we can mold this guy. He'll be able to do it. Go to law school, go to business school, go to journalism school, be a sportscaster, be a writer. All these things, right, with my history degree from Northwestern. You're going to have a good degree. You're going to be okay. It doesn't all have to work out right away. You'll be fine. And then finally, follow your instincts. Do what makes sense to you, not what makes sense to other people. What makes sense to you. Okay? That, I cannot emphasize that enough. It is about you. It's your life. It's not their life. Take a risk. Don't be afraid to fail, because it's not failure. It's just a step towards your destination, right? 3 for 100 and whatever, right? I failed a lot. I had a lot of people tell me that I wasn't good enough. So in conclusion, I want to go back to Excellent Sheep. And I was looking through it the other day, and I found just a profoundly sad quote from a student at Cornell. This is what she said, quote, I hate all my activities. I hate all my classes. I hated everything I did in high school. I expect to hate my job, and this is just how it's going to be for the rest of my life. That may be the saddest thing I've ever read. And I'm here to tell you that is not how it has to be. But now is the time to stop it. Right now is the time to start asking yourself those questions. And I think of how close I was to going down that path. And I want to leave you with one story that I didn't tell you, right? I told you about all the great things that happened to me. I didn't get into the one law school I really wanted to go to. Okay, I got rejected at Yale. And why did I want to go to Yale? Well, I visited Yale Law School, and I talked to the students there. And they said to me, you know, the great thing about Yale is you get a degree from here, and you don't have to be a lawyer. There's so many other things you could do, and most of the people who come out of here aren't lawyers. They go do other things, and they just have this great credential that I went to Yale Law School. And I said to myself, that's perfect, because I don't want to be a lawyer. And so this is the perfect place for me. Think about how preposterous that is, right? I don't want to be a lawyer, so I'm going to go to this law school. There are lots of other good ways not to be a lawyer. First and foremost among them, don't go to law school, right? But this somehow did not occur to me until the very last moment. And years later, my father was on an airplane. He's coming out to visit us in Connecticut. ESPN is located in Connecticut, as you probably know as is Yale as well. And my dad's seated on the plane. He strikes up a conversation with the guy next to him. And he says to him, "What do you do?" And the guy says, "I'm the dean of admissions at Yale Law School." And so my dad says to him, "Really? How long have you been in that position?" And the guy said, 17, 18 years. And my dad does the math in his head, and he says, "I want to thank you." I said, "For what?" He said, "For rejecting my son." The guy looks at him and says, "What in the world are you talking about?" My dad says, "Well, my son applied there, and I know he would have gone there had he gotten in, but he didn't get in, and I'm going to visit him and his wife and their kids in Connecticut. He's a sportscaster at ESPN. He's deliriously happy, and it just worked out so great for him." And I often think about what might have happened had he gone to Yale Law School. So, it was really close. And I think that's why this is such a passion for me. So many things had to work out, not the least of which was that rejection. But my final thought to you is don't think about those hurdles just for a little bit of time, right? Stop jumping over them because people are telling you to. Stop jumping over them because that's what you've done your whole life. And jump over them only if you believe those are the right hurdles for you. Because there is an entire world out there. And so your job in these next couple of years as you finish up school is to figure out what the right hurdles are for you and what would make you happy. You're going to learn a lot of things today, and they're really, really valuable. And again, I said this at the beginning, I'm going to say it again. This is not in any way to minimize any of these careers you're going to hear about. I'm not telling you not to go to one cluster or don't go to another cluster. These are all wonderful careers. But what you need to decide is this the right career for me? Listen to that little voice that's inside of you, and don't be afraid to get off the path. You can always get back on if you need to.